So GM stopped making the Bolt again because profitability, I guess, is the main concern. They stopped making it originally because of all the battery risks, but seems like they've figured out all of those issues with the refreshed Chevy Bolts, and a lot of people loved them. They were much more affordable, they had pretty decent range, of course they didn't charge all that fast. In fact, as far as mainstream EVs go, they basically charged the slowest in the biz, but I'm guessing they were losing too much money on them. But finally, Chevy has decided to start dropping teaser images of the next generation Chevy Bolt. So they haven't done an official unveil yet, they've just given us a few up-close shots, and I'm very happy to say that I'm already upset. I mean, sure, the taillights look a lot cleaner than before, and I think the designers are likely playing a very fun game of don't make it look too much like the Equinox. I mean, everybody loves that game, right? But my main frustration comes down to the charge port location, and I thought now would be a great time to explain in detail why I'm so passionate about this topic, because a lot of you might think this is more simple than it really is. For one, yes, the Chevy Bolt does have a NAX port, so I guess hats off to Chevy for, bringing this up to speed with the rest of the industry. But that's about where the good changes end, because for one, they left the charge port in the same place, which there's a lot more to this story than just that. But yeah, because they didn't want to move the charge port on the Chevy Bolt, it is still on the driver's side front, but because they switched it to the native NAX port, that means to bring this to superchargers, which is I think what they're kind of encouraging with this platform, it's going to be occupying 2 stalls at every V3 location. There's over 20,000 V3 stalls in the United States, and they have the cheapest price per kilowatt hour, which basically means this is going to be the default charging system for the Chevy Bolt. And despite it being a smaller vehicle, it's still going to be occupying more than one space because Chevy didn't feel like relocating the charge port to the driver's side rear, which is the same as Tesla's, which is what the V3s were optimized for. But even then, I feel like they somehow made this worse because of the way they mounted the charge flap. It opens towards the front of the vehicle, which when you have a frontward mounted charge port means essentially there's going to be a lot of situations where, not all V3 superchargers are laid out the same. So that means you might pull into a spot and try to get the cable to stretch all the way to the charge port. But even then, you're going to have to tuck this big, hard to route, high voltage cable around that charge port door. This is already going to be an annoying vehicle to charge, and that's not even addressing the C rate of the battery pack. The Chevy Bolt was notoriously known for having basically the slowest DC charge speed in the industry for a full EV, maxing out at around 50 kilowatts, and that's already a big concern a lot of EV owners have, is that in the future there's going to be lots of slower charging EVs like the Bolt that are increasing wait times and lines at superchargers because they charge so slowly and they occupy 2 spaces. Maybe this issue is much more important to me because I've been on a lot of all-electric road trips, and I have literally witnessed this issue take place in real time, where I show up to a supercharger, and even though there's a space left, there are other EVs that cannot charge because of the non-Teslas that are charging there, resulting in brand new EV buyers that didn't want a Tesla, of course, because they don't want any associations with their CEO. I get that, I don't blame you, but now they're left stranded at a supercharger having to wait for someone to unplug, and it can't just be anyone who unplugs, because if one car unplugs and leaves, an F-150 Lightning could pull in and still not have the cable reach. Hindsight is 2020, yes. I would have loved to go back in time and tell Tesla to increase the length of the cables on existing V3 superchargers, but we can't change the past. We can change the future, though, and GM knew this going into designing the Chevy Bolt and actively chose not to do it. And I think this is absolutely the type of vehicle that needs to prioritize that, because it's a slower charging EV already, which means the longer you take at the supercharger, the longer you're taking up 2 spaces, and also it's supposed to be a far more affordable EV, which means the people who buy the next generation Chevy Bolt are more likely to be the type of people who live in apartment buildings, who can't charge from home, and therefore are far more likely to be topping off at DC fast chargers. Also, even if you want to take the curbside charging argument, where people say like, oh, we need to have more passenger side charge ports so you can plug it in while parallel parking, I don't think that's a super common use case. I keep hearing people describe this scenario, but literally I drive through San Francisco all the time and I never see it. I hardly ever see people curbside charging. It's very rare. I don't think very many utilities like installing level 2 chargers on sidewalks. I think the future is going to be a lot more DC fast charging than it is AC charging, but even if you support the curbside charging argument, this driver's side charge port system does not support that. And before everybody argues with me and says, oh no, Drew, you need the charge port to be closer to the driver, that makes more sense. No, I don't even buy into that belief anymore. I know a lot of people are charging from home in the first place, but technically speaking, as long as doors, especially the driver door, continues to open outward the way it does, driver's side rear is by far and away the most convenient place to put a charge port. I don't care how Tesla came up with the location. Some people think that the location was just decided because of Elon's garage or something stupid. It probably was. But I don't care how they came to that conclusion. Just living with an EV, that is the best place to charge it. For one, DC fast chargers are much cheaper and easier to stall when you can prefabricate the stalls from the factory. That allows deployments to go quicker. That's why there's not as many pull-through stalls as there is back-in stalls. Also, backing into the fast charger is objectively safer. You know, all EVs have to have backup cameras now anyway. But even if they didn't, it is far more dangerous for you to be backing into oncoming traffic because obviously the driver sits in the front in the vehicle. So for all these vehicles where you have to pull in to charge, you have a much harder time backing out of the busy parking lot, especially if you got EVs trying to rush in and take your spot. It's so much easier and objectively safer to leave the busy fast charger by pulling forward as you unplug. That gives you so much more visibility as you're leaving, and it's a lot easier when you get to your supercharger location. Orient the vehicle as it needs to be backed up and then let auto park do the rest. Or if you prefer parking yourself, I know I do, the backup camera is much better at that. The backup camera is not as good when it comes to fast moving perpendicular traffic, which is why I think backing into DC fast chargers makes the most economical amount of sense. And also, if you're in a busy fast charger, I've been to many on my road trips, putting the charge port in front of the driving position means that you have to get out of the car, open the door, and then back up and squeeze around the front door to get to the charge cable in the front. If you put it on passenger side rear, now you've got to reach around the entire back end of the car. And for home charging, that's as far away as you can get the charge cable from the vehicle. Also, with home charging, you have a much better likelihood of being able to control where the charge cable is. With home charging, you have much longer cables, so there's more flexibility at home with how you park and how you plug in. But optimizing the charge port for you pull into a busy charger, you open the door, as you're getting out, you are directly in the path towards the cable, you grab it, you plug in, you get back in the car, you never even had to close the door. Can't be said the same when you do a driver's side front charge port location. And especially when you put the charge port flap in the direct path that the short V3 cable is going to have to go. That just made it instantly harder to plug into, and it means you might have to be waiting even longer on these DC fast charging stops because there might be a stall or two available, but you straight up just can't plug in because your car wasn't designed for existing infrastructure. That's a big miss, in my opinion. Aside from that, I hope the Chevy Bolt is good, genuinely. Like, I'm trying to figure out how they're going to make it much cheaper than the Chevy Equinox. I hope they can increase the DC fast charging performance, but to switch to native NACS, which is kind of inviting everybody to take it to superchargers, because obviously that's where you're not going to need an adapter, but then leaving the charge port in the charge flap the way it is, such a mistake, in my opinion. Such a horrible location, and here's hoping that they can compensate for it with a substantially lower starting price than the Equinox. LFP batteries would also be cool, but how do you guys feel about the teaser images for the Chevy Bolt so far? Feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos, so thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.